Okay, welcome back to Practice Underwater. We have another one of our Q&A episodes. Next week, we promise we will have a regularly scheduled Practice Underwater interview. But for today, we have another Q&A edition. So welcome. I have Alex Sharp with me. How you doing, Alex?
Doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. And I was trying to think back of the last time you were on. It has to be at least a couple months. So tell us what's new in your world.
Phew, it's been a lot, man. I mean, with the new year going on, we're hoping to continue to put a lot of the COVID after effects in the rearview mirror. But the biggest growth edge for me is the shared practices mastermind and seeing all the cool stuff that's been coming on with it, onboarding new members and creating a really fun culture that spawned from us having a lot of time to work on things during COVID, and then now we have just a really cool group of people that are sharing and learning every day. And so I spend a lot of my time outside of the practice working with those docs, and then on the practice front, dipping my toe into the multi-practice realm and getting that going here locally. So yeah, a lot of changes, a lot of fun in 2021.
Nice, man. Big year coming.
Dude, I know. And the thing is, like my word for this year is abundance. So,
Mhm.
going forward and not being afraid of taking on a little bit of healthy risk. I mean, that's how you grow. You can't learn and grow with that scarcity mindset.
So you're telling me Richard's experience from his DSO was not enough to sway you against it?
It wasn't enough, and he's got a really good cautionary tale with
Mhm.
it. A lot of things that you don't want to do, and a lot of things that you can use those as lessons. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and there's a lot of people that have had experiences with solo practice ownership, group practice ownership, multi-practice ownership, and there's cautionary tales in every way. But really, every market's different. I feel like in my market, there's a lot of opportunity if you handle it the way that works for that market.
Yeah, and I think we pointed to that it was just a breakdown in visions not aligning, which is actually going to get right into our first question, a little segue. Um, so I'm gonna put it to you, and then we can have a little discussion. So, first question: you guys have been talking a lot recently about vision. So, what is the best way to figure out my vision for the type of practice that is best for me?
Yeah, to the listener who posed this question, I think the place to start is, what do you enjoy doing? Like, what brings you joy? I think a lot of us, and myself included, and I think you could testify to this as well, is that we get into dentistry, we get into practice ownership from a place of feeling like we should. And we don't know if that should comes intrinsically or extrinsically, but we think we should do this, we should do that. And it's easy to go with the prevailing winds of, oh, I've been out of school for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I should be a practice owner, or I should be placing implants because everyone's placing implants. So step one with vision is to take a clear and honest look at yourself and audit, what are your preferences, what are your strengths, what do you like to do, and you want to take some lessons from what other people are doing, but not necessarily emulate to the nth degree what they're doing. And honestly, that you'll probably mention this as well, but one pivot that we've made at Shared Practices is understanding that sometimes you have to jump into the pool to figure out what kind of swimmer you are. Because some people buy a practice and say, oh, wow, I hate being the only person in the building. I hate being the only doctor. Or some people buy a group practice and realize, oh, man, I hate the quality control that comes from having associates. So sometimes you have to jump in and then figure it out. But as to some degree, having a clear idea of what your strengths are as a person, what brings you joy, what stresses you out, and then start there. What would your experience be? What would you answer that question with?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said there. I think the way kind of George has got me to think about it is what are the problems you want to have versus the ones you don't want to have. Like, are you a George type where a failed implant is going to keep you up at night, or are you a person where a staff member coming and crying to your office is going to be keeping you up at night? And seeing what model of practice that fits in. Is it solo, group, or multi? And you raise a great point that you can do a lot of this self work of figuring this out beforehand, but you're really not going to know for sure until you're in there and actually dealing with the problems day to day. So it's definitely not a going to keep you out of the out of the deep end, like by doing this exercise, but it's still extremely helpful because you'll most likely get it right. So I know this isn't something that I sat with a lot before I bought, which is, now I'm sold a group, right? Because I didn't actually go through the exercise of figuring out the vision before I bought the practice. So I've loved that we've trained our listeners to kind of think about these things, especially before they get into ownership. It's super, super helpful.
Right, because there is a nuance there. Like practice ownership categorically is a good thing, but there are shades of gray in there that dictate your level of career satisfaction based on your own preferences and your own strengths. Because if you know that you're a technician at heart and you love layering composites and doing high-end lab work, I mean, you're probably not going to be the type that loves managing tons of associates. Like it's hard to draw those hard and fast distinctions, but for the most part, if you enjoy the relationships and the growth and the pursuit, then group practice. But if you know that you enjoy the clinical, it's easy to not be 100% sure what your preferences are as far as style of practice. But at the end of the day, doing a vision exercise is always a great starting point to figure out what type of practice might suit you the best, and then move forward from there. And don't be afraid to pivot.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to my experience of looking up YouTube videos like nonstop on dentistry, dental town forums, like taking clinical CE. And I fast forward to today, my hygienist says, you really don't like doing a lot of things. I'm like, yeah, I suppose you're right. I can't really argue there because I really don't like doing a lot of clinical things at the office anymore. And that's part of the pivot. Like, I think I listened to my gut when it told me one thing, and I would encourage people to do the same. Like, whatever your gut is telling you at the moment that is the area you should be delving into, I would trust it.
Without a doubt. We've got another question that says, I feel 100% completely overwhelmed by everything going on right now. Staff, patients, family, everything. How are you guys coping with the stress of the world? That's a big one. Solving the world's problems here, Matt.
Wow, what a responsibility. Well, then again, our leader can't do it, so I guess someone's got to step up, right? No, I mean, it's a lot. Like this whole year, pandemic, everything else that went on, everything that's going on currently still, like it's been a crazy year and a crazy time. And like, just to like take a step back and understand, like, the whole society is going through a lot right now. And then like the dentists are in there. We're not excluded from this. We have our little bubble that we stay in, but like, we're part of this world. And I just think about like what or who is supporting you. Like, what are you doing for your well-being? And that looks, different for every person. Meditation, working out, eating well, family, support structures, therapy, life coaching, mastermind group, all those things help to keep you grounded and keep you fully supported, that they're there for you when we're all going through a lot. We need those people in our lives. And I would just kind of take stock of where each and every one of you is with that and how you can further support it, because that's going to get what's going to keep you grounded, when the world around you is seemingly falling apart at every end. What would you say to that?
I could not agree more. That there's a book that I just finished reading called The Tools by Phil Stutz, and it talks about different tools you can use to optimize your life. But when it comes to managing stress, one of the big points that they made was focus on gratitude. Always double down on gratitude. Because 2020 pulled the rug out from under us in a lot of ways. And yeah, it could have been worse. But one thing that I've told my team at my office is always assume that we're catching people at their worst, and be ready to practice grace, practice forgiveness, practice patience with them, and turn that around and be thankful for what we do have. Because there's a lot that we do have. It could always be worse, and always circle back to gratitude. Like on the most trying days clinically, whether it's, like you said, failed implants or you're having staff issues, try to think about, even when it's painful, what's going right and what you do have going for you. And that can be the little perspective shift that you might need in that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point about the gratitude. I think we should all have gratitude for being in the dental profession. Like, as far as industries goes, business-wide, like, we're one of the ones that recovered pretty quick. And, should we have been forced to be closed for a couple months? That's debatable. But we came back strong from it, and we're kind of proving how recession proof the industry is. Be thankful for that. Like, think of restaurants, think of movie theaters, think of the event space. Like, I go on and on about industries that are going to take years to recover, and we, pretty much recovered kind of right away after once we were allowed to return. I mean, I know my practice still has lingering effects as far as like patient flow from this, and it's ongoing, but not enough that we can't be open and be profitable, and all that. So like, really, acknowledge that and be thankful for the profession you chose. It was a very smart choice.
Yeah, at least we're not concert promoters or something right now.
I mean, those guys are like, there's no end in sight still. We're like 10 months into this.
Nope.
Oh my gosh, it's wild. Okay, so next one. When my practice is ready for a hygiene assistant, what should his or her roles be?
Ooh, that's a meaty one. So assisted hygiene, a lot of consulting companies out there espouse the benefits of assisted hygiene, talking about how it's a way to grow your revenue on the hygiene side while only marginally increasing your overhead. And yeah, that's true. And yeah, that can work in certain styles of practice. But be thinking, again, it all goes back to vision. We sound like broken records, but if you want your practice to be more of a volume-based entity that sees as many patients as possible per day with maybe not the highest degree of service or touch, then you can do traditional assisted hygiene where you have 2 columns of hygiene seen by one hygienist. So maybe you're seeing 12 to 14 patients a day with one hygienist. What my practice does is we still have 1 column per hygienist, and then we have 1 hygiene assistant that just floats between hygienists to help take x-rays, turn over rooms, do whatever needs to be done to pitch in to keep things running on time and to keep the type of experience high for the patient. But I mean, if you're growing or you're a startup and you need a quick way to increase your capacity, then doing assisted hygiene where the hygiene assistant is seating the patient, taking x-rays, doing more hands-on stuff in the appointment, that's a good way to go. It's just, ask me how I know, to quote George, it's hard to integrate a hygiene assistant and do full-blown assisted hygiene in an office that's not used to doing that with patients who aren't used to doing that. It's much easier to integrate a hygiene assistant to just help with the appointments rather than having them be like super patient facing. What's your experience with it, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I would want to know a really strong reason why they want to do assisted hygiene if it's a new thing.
Right.
I think there's 2 main drawbacks to it. You pointed to one of them, patient experience being one that can suffer in that model where you're just going quicker on an appointment. I've never had someone come out of hygiene and complain that appointment was too long. Like that's never really like a consideration, assuming it's an hour appointment. And the other area I would wonder if it'd probably be a drawback would be treatment planning and case acceptance and diagnosing comprehensively and having enough time for that. I assume with assisted hygiene, they want to get it down to 30 minutes, maybe 45 at the most. So you're squeezing your available doctor time as far as what you can present and, present and have accepted by the patient. So those are the 2 drawbacks I see. I like your model where it's like a hygiene assistant, it's not assisted hygiene. Funny, you flip the words and it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
What go through on because I'm curious, so I don't have this position, but in the course of an hour, how much of that hour is she in hygiene? Is she doing other things? Like, how busy is she in that position?
Her biggest benefit to us is on the new patient exams because she's able to help perio chart, she's able to help get x-rays, and then she's able to turn over rooms quickly. And we have a system because we have 5 hygienists here at any time. We have a board where we track who's ready for an exam and if there's a doctor preference, and she helps keep the hygiene program on time. And again, she doesn't have a hard and fast role in each appointment. It's really just plugging in where she's available, checking on the hygienists and giving them, and it's also nice from a hygiene perspective because then they feel like they're not in it all by themselves and they have someone watching out for them, getting them instruments if they need it, or if the patient needs a neck pillow or a blanket, then the hygiene assistant's able to bring that to them. But no, it's a it's a luxury, not a necessity, but it helps the patient experience marginally, and it helps the hygienist's work experience pretty substantially.
And which number of hygienists did you feel like you needed this position?
4. Yeah,
Okay, so after 4.
Yeah, so once we got to 4 full time, between sterilization and turning over the pano room, and like there's just all that stuff that gets scaled up, all the behind the scenes stuff. And again, the hygienists know that it's not a guarantee that we have that position, but to me, with the hygiene pool being what it is right now, it's hard to find hygienists. And the last thing I want to do is lose one because it's something that's preventable. Like if I can make it a better place to work for, an assistant's hourly wage, then I'm all for that. Sign me up, because so many people are struggling with finding hygiene help right now. And I'm just thankful to have the group that I do.
Yeah, I love that. It, like you said, it's marginal, better patient experience, but also better staff experience, which is important for staff retention, which I think people kind of gloss over a bit, is not a big consideration. As someone who's had a lot of staff turnover, I know how big a deal it is. It's not enjoyable.
No, it's sucks the wind out of you on every level. Morale's bad. Your level of stress as the owner is unavoidably high, and anything you can do to keep people happy and to keep people engaged, like you can't put a price on that, really.
Absolutely. So I think this delves into one of your questions you have for me.
Yes.
I want to say.
Yeah, the next one we had was, what are some ways to overcome a relative lack of hygiene production?
That's a beefy one. So I would try to get to the root of the problem. Okay, so lack of hygiene production. That could be the hygienists aren't doing enough, or there's not enough patients. So figure out which bucket is the leaky one. And in each bucket, you have different solutions. Obviously, for lack of patients, that's overdue recare list. That's new patients. Get it from two sides. If they're not doing enough, well, then you lean on a software like PBN, where you can see, how much floor are they doing, how much perio are they doing, what are they doing per hour. So you might find insurance verification not happening, not taking enough X-rays, not coding correctly, not doing it at the right frequencies. It could be that your fees are low. Like that could be a reason your hygiene production is low. There's not like a ton of things that could be off. It's like really 8 things in each things. It's pretty straightforward. I think people look at it as something confusing, but really break it down. What is the root of the problem, and what are the potential in that area? What are the potential things that could be going wrong, and how do we fix those?
Yeah, with hygiene, it's not rocket science. And I think my practice and your practice illustrate 2 different ways to do it well, in that mine is more of a volume model and yours is more of a revenue per patient encounter model, because you guys are able to do a lot with a little. Like your hygiene flow isn't as crazy as mine is, but your hygienists are so well trained that they're able to make the most out of each hour of time with a patient. So, I mean, you can be successful no matter, how many operatories you have or how many hygienists you're able to hire or what your hours are. Like you can find a way to modify based on fees or based on geographic location. Like there's ways around any of those challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can, like you said, you can maximize what you do on each person. If you don't have a lot of people coming through the door, if you have a lot more coming through the door, then you win on volume. Like there's two ways to win. And I mean, our practices, hygiene models couldn't be any different. New York and Arkansas, small practice, big practice, like there's a lot of differences, but we fundamentally believe in the same things about patient experience, presenting fluoride, having perio be at an adequate level, insurance verification, like all the fundamentals, we believe in the same. Just the byproducts, the output looks different.
Right. And that's what's cool about the shared practices approach, is that it's not any type of like paint by numbers thing. Like you have general guidelines that you adhere to and that you live by, but based on the inputs, you know how to work them so that you get the desired output.
Exactly.
Before we get back to the episode, I wanted to take a minute and thank Practice by Numbers. Without their help and allowing us to set up the shared practices dashboard, a lot of what we do on Practice Underwater wouldn't be possible. I want to take a minute and highlight a clip from the episode that we did with Rohit, where we highlighted some of the metrics that really matter most.
You cannot look at them just by themselves. You have to look at a few other things together with it. But the most important number any practice right off the bat should look at is patient acceptance. And the difference between treatment acceptance and patient acceptance is treatment acceptance is the amount of dollars that were accepted. For example, if you presented $100,000 worth of treatment, how much of that has been accepted, meaning scheduled or completed? Okay, so in this particular example, if 100,000 was presented, 55,000 was accepted, or either scheduled or completed. But the second part is 72%, which is the patient acceptance. What this means is that if you presented $100,000 worth of treatment to 100 patients, meaning $1,000 per patient, 72 of those patients scheduled some aspect of that treatment. Looking at patient acceptance is the absolute best way to go.
I hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you guys are interested in trying out Practice by Numbers and looking at your practice through the Shared Practices dashboard, and there are many other dashboards, you can go to practicebynumbers.com and set up a free trial.
Okay, next one is pretty related. So what is the best way to introduce a metrics tracking software to your team? How do you use it to hold them accountable?
Well, in keeping with the hygiene theme, I think for me, it's hugely beneficial to, number one, educate your hygienists and show that you think you're doing this type of skill this well, but the numbers show this. For example, we always talk about fluoride. Well, do you? I mean, you can look and point to black and white and say, really last month, only 20% of your patients accepted fluoride. And it's really easy to have accountability when you have the metrics. A lot of people really, when you're talking about implementing something like Practice by Numbers or Dental Intel into your practice, a lot of dentists treat it with trepidation because they're worried, what are my staff going to think about having something else to do, something else to log into, something else to watch all the time. But if you show the value that they stand to gain from it, like if you talk to your hygienists and say, if we want to have some type of commission based on certain metrics, or if we want to have some type of a team bonus or a team trip or a team CE course, whatever it is, you can suddenly get buy-in pretty darn quick. And especially if you tie it back into your practice's mission statement, vision statement, what your core values are, you can say, if we're trying to serve the most people possible and make a difference in our community and make people's view of the dental office be less scary, then this is a really objective way to measure how well we're doing with that. But I think tying in some key performance indicators, creating some different metrics by department is the way to do it. Like in my office, we have a scoreboard that we have on a whiteboard in our meeting area, and my office manager updates it every day. So if you pick the right metrics to keep track of, like for example, because we're talking about hygiene.
Well, let's go over what you have on the whole board, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. So for hygiene, we have hygiene reappointment rate. Our goal is 95% for that. For hygiene, we have fluoride. In my office, it's 80% is the goal across the board in hygiene.
Incredible.
And perio, our goal is 25%. Do we hit that every month? No, but that's our goal.
Now, do you have hygiene bonuses tied to those numbers at all?
We don't. We don't. I know a lot of offices do. We have it more just based on like an hourly approach. If you extrapolate out the hourly goal times however many hours they worked in a pay period, that's how we calculate it. Gotcha. It's more of a percentage.
So they're all in there. They're just not like bonus directly off those numbers.
Right. And we've inched our way up on those goals over the years to where it sounds outlandish at first to say 80% fluoride, but we started at 20 and then we went to 40, then we went to 60, and now we're at 80, and that's the expectation.
Of like doctor presenting treatment, like the better ones, and a lot of our clients are around 80%. So you present the crown 80% of the time, it's being done. And then you see the fluorides at their office and they're 10%. So there's a 70% difference whether patients listen to you.
Yeah.
Like what has actually happened? They're not presenting it,
No,
or maybe when they do, they're not presenting it effectively either.
Yeah, it's education. It's taking the time to do it. Because you brought up the point, no one's ever complained that their hygiene appointment took too long. Like we don't want you running through your hygiene appointment in half an hour. Like if you have an adult, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of hygiene things to talk about. There's a lot of treatment to talk about. And if you're rushing, if you do a full-blown assisted hygiene model, for example, you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies by trying to squeeze stuff in. But yeah, I mean, with hygiene, to go back to the metric software, a lot of easy things to track there. And for front office, what we talk about is a new patient number. We talk about our collections goal per month. And then we talk about, you alluded to it, the patient acceptance number. What percentage of patients on whom something was diagnosed are saying yes to something? That number is a lot less doctor dependent for me, because me and my associates across the board have very similar patient acceptance. I think that's more of a function of how warmly was the patient greeted when they walked in? How did they feel when they were being seated? How did the hygiene visit go? To me, that's indicative of the whole office, whereas the treatment acceptance number, what percentage of all of the treatment did you diagnose? That's more doctor dependent to me. And that's very variable across providers. So you could be swinging for home runs and presenting full mouth rehabs on everybody, and then your treatment acceptance number might be really low. Or you may be just purely patching stuff, and then your treatment acceptance might be really high. So that number for me is a little more finicky, but patient acceptance is what we really focus on.
Yeah, that's an important point for someone in a group practice model. So if you either adding on their associate, say replacing another associate, you can now you have a consistent number you can compare the new associate to say, hey, is this person underperforming, or are they very similar to every doctor who's ever been in here? It's a quick way and pretty accurate way to tell that kind of thing and be able to train if that is if they are underperforming.
Yeah, no doubt. It adds a layer of objectivity to it, because I think a big take-home message of all of our shared practices content is, you want to take, with stuff like this, you want to take away the gut feeling part of it. Like when you're making decisions on personnel and how they're performing, as much as you can put a number to it, it tends to be better. It tends to take the emotion out of it. And if you can use those metric softwares to their fullest potential, you can really make a more objective decision on a lot of things.
100%. So what else we got in the whiteboard? Anything else?
The only other thing, the challenge for me is finding ways to have assistants track anything metrics wise, because it's easy for front office, it's easy for hygiene. For us, we have two things that the assistants track. We have a percentage of patients leaving restorative with an appointment, because those are your limited exam types, the people that typically fall off the radar pretty quickly, that are the frequent flyers in the doctor's chair but don't ever come in for hygiene. So if you can get the assistants tracking those people that might fall off the cliff, getting them back in, that's very important. And then the other thing is work-in treatment that we track. Work-in treatment, like same day treatment opportunity.
Work-in treatment.
Yeah.
Are you creating your own name here? Same day.
Same day. Yeah.
Sorry. Well, so what's that percentage for leaving restorative with an appointment? What's the goal?
Our goal for that is 90.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one for me. Office policy, no one leaves without an appointment.
Yeah. So you can't have your back door open. Like, you are completely stymieing your growth if your back door is open at all.
Yeah. It's great fundamentals, and in a smaller office, it's even more important. You just have less humans in your system. So each one matters that bit more.
No, the stakes are higher in a smaller office for sure.
Yeah.
Next question that we have is, I want to grow my practice, but I'm struggling to find a hygienist. How are you handling the shortage of hygienists right now? It seems to be hygiene is a common thread with our questions today.
That's your favorite subject, so it's funny how it worked out. You love talking hygiene.
I do.
I know. Anyways, struggling to find hygienists. Is there a lack of hygienists right now? Is that what we're going through? I want to make sure we're all clear on the industry trends that we assess through dental Facebook groups.
That seems to be the trend. Like if we're talking industry standard and we're talking about taking the pulse of the various Facebook groups, it seems like attraction and then retention of hygienists is an industry-wide challenge.
So I'll answer this very bluntly. Why do I care about a shortage of hygienists? I don't need hygienists. I need one. I just need one person. So you're telling me that right now you can't find one hygienist? Now, I've had a client in Alaska who actually really did have trouble finding people because he was in like the middle of nowhere, Alaska. So I want to get for everyone else, like you just need one person.
True.
Like every person I've hired, for the most part, it's not been like I've got 20 applicants. I've gotten like 3. That's always been. It's been since I started last, 3 years ago. That's been my reality. I just need to find one person, and I'm confident that the systems in our office and my leadership can take a B- to an A, take a C+ to an A-. Like I'm confident our culture in the office will boost that person up. I just literally need someone who's competent, coachable, friendly. Like that's really the qualities I'm looking for.
You guys need to write that down, underline it, put it on your bulletin board. Seriously, because you can get someone who is passable as a hygienist or a front office team member, and if you plug them into the correct system and you give them the correct support, you can turn a C+ into an A. It can happen. And so you don't need to be searching for Michael Jordans all the time. You need to be searching for role players that you can plug into the correct position and allow them to thrive. I love that.
And I made this analogy before, I think, on this podcast. Bill Belichick, I'm a huge Patriots fan, built the team on these $5 billion a year guys, passed off by other teams. So not really cheap players, definitely not the expensive ones, middle of the road. And he stacked the lineup with that. And he boosted all of them up. So they're now playing at a $10 million level. So he's able to have a lot of those kind of players. And, getting a Michael Jordan as a dental staff member, they're expensive. Like they demand higher pay. Maybe they're worth it, maybe not. But I would rather stack the middle of the road, boost them up to now they're overperforming what they're paid, and you win out much better on that.
No doubt about that.
All right, I got another one for you. So, how do I know when I'm ready for another front office team member?
This one is a very nuanced question because you hear different coaches, different consultants give vastly different answers on this one. Because you have one extreme where some people say you want to stretch one person to the absolute max in the interest of lowering overhead. And then you have other people that say that you need it highly specialized and then anything in between. One industry standard rule that I've read is one front office equivalent per hygienist, per full-time hygienist. And to me, that rings pretty true. Like, for example, in my office, we have 5 full-time hygienists and 4 physical bodies at the front office, plus 1 person offsite doing insurance verification. So that roughly holds true. What I was talking about in the mastermind the other day related to this is that when you're a younger, less mature office and you have 1 front office person, that person wears a lot of hats. And then as you grow, the weight of those hats becomes greater, and then you have to split, and then you have to split again as you grow. And so the roles become more specialized. And so I think it's critical, say you're in that stage where you have 1 front office, 1 assistant, 1 hygienist, and you're growing, you're about to add another hygienist, and then you need to hire another front office person. Take a look at what the strengths are of that existing front office person, and then hire for that person's weaknesses. If they're really good at answering the phone and making people feel welcome, then hire someone who maybe is a bit more bookish and is more numbers minded to pick up for that person's deficiency, so that when you have that crew, you have all of the different skills represented. So I think when you're adding a hygienist, that's a good time to take the temperature of your front office and say, are we overstaffed, properly staffed? Are we grossly understaffed? I think it's a good idea, especially as you're growing. You're going to have that ugly duckling phase where you add a team member and all of a sudden your staff overhead looks out of whack while you're really recouping that growth. So don't be afraid to have that look a little bloated at first, especially if you know, well, by adding this person, I can see more patients or I can expand my hours. Like, you have to have some stomach lining to whenever you're adding a new person.
Yeah, that's all really, really good points there. I think, it's easy to like look at what you're doing collection wise and then input that new salary. And you're like, well, my staff was at 25. This puts me at 29. So that's out of the range. I can't afford it right now. And you're really projecting your current reality into your future reality. Is your future reality going to be different with another staff member who can do a lot of the tasks that I'm sure aren't being fully handled by that one? I would say absolutely. So your future reality doesn't have to be the collection number you're at now. I think that's a really poor way of looking at if you're ready for another hygienist. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts as far as rollout. So you got the one doctor, one assistant, one hygienist. How would you roll out a second one for, second hygiene assistant and front? What order I know it's different for all, but is there a general way you can look at that?
We have clients that do really all different permutations of that. I think very commonly the doctor side fills up and you get the need for two assistants, because a lot of doctors do their own hygiene at first. So depending on
that's a thing.
That's a thing. I'm not condoning it or saying it's kosher or not, but it happens. So if you are that type and you're watching your costs and you're doing some more of your own hygiene, then you're probably going to have another assistant quickly. It's a lower cost team member to add. And really, I think you see people adding more assistants in front office prior to adding another hygienist. People tend to think about that a whole lot more just because you're going to be paying more. Howard Ferran famously talks about how he hired 3 hygienists from the jump so that he could get a whole family seen at that 8 o'clock slot, like horizontally on the schedule rather than vertically. That's a bold move, but I think it's smart to keep that in mind, that you don't want to be too slow to add hygienists. I think a lot of us are too reactive when it comes to adding that capacity. And honestly, like whenever George talks about being able to offer a new patient 3 spots within the next 2 weeks as being like the barometer for when you want to add another person, I think that holds true, because my practice is scarcely ever in a position where we can offer 3 spots to someone in the next 2 weeks. And so I think most of us really underestimate our ability to hold more capacity.
So when is hygiene number 6 coming?
Then that's split shifting, and then my head might end up on a spike outside the front office.
Hey, well, I heard from George you were instrumental for him split shifting his own staff, so maybe we can practice what we preach here.
That's a growing edge for me, man. Like I'm working on it. That's going to be top of the list at our next leadership team meeting. Trust me.
What do they say? Those that can't do teach. Is this what's happening here?
Yeah, exactly. That's dovetailing with that one. I think our final question of the night is, how do you divide up the roles of your front office team? We talked about the ways that it splits as we grow, and every office is a little different with who does what. So how do you divide up your roles, Matt?
Yeah, I think it was what you got into just there about finding a second front is like the weaknesses of the first one. I think let's say you have 2 already. Clearly assessing strengths, weaknesses. Like, what do they do well? What do they not do well? What do they enjoy doing? What do they not enjoy doing? And I kind of go personally over what I think are the most important tasks. I want my absolute best person on that. For me, presenting treatment, that's the thing I care about most. Like, I want that done perfectly. Insurance fees ready, using the right verbiage, is able to be coached in that. So I want my best person on that. And you could call that person financial coordinator, might be a term. So the way that role could look would be presenting treatment, in charge of filling doctor side schedule. That could be insurance claims, that could be AR, all kind of fit nicely in there. Second position could be patient care coordinator, so we can call that. That could be answering the phone, being the receptionist, kind of scheduling the hygiene appointments, calling overdue recare, just being that more reception type. And then also, doing some level of cross training where they're able to handle some of the tasks. Maybe entering EOBs would be a good one for patient care coordinator. Something pretty simple. That's how I have it divvied up my office. Alex, I know you have several more than I do. So, what are your kind of roles that you have going on?
Mine's really very similar. We have a greeter who does a lot of the appointment confirmations and scheduling. We have someone who's the primary scheduler for hygiene that handles a lot of our checkout. Also, we have an office manager that doubles as the backup treatment coordinator, and then we have someone who's like treatment coordinator / insurance. Then I mentioned that we have the offsite insurance verification going on, and again, I think it's useful to not fall into the trap of saying that all of my roles in my office need to mirror what somebody else's look like, because you're going to have a different skill set represented in your front office by your team. So you want to be flexible in delineating those roles and making it work for you, because you can't just go to Breakaway and say, well, this is how Breakaway says to do it. Well, yeah, you want to take elements that work for you, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to fit that square peg in the round hole, it's not going to work. You have to work with the team that you have and give them some authorship to some degree over what their strengths are and where they can contribute the best.
Now, is your office like George's, where do you have a front member who does not deal inpatient items or activity at all?
We are working toward that, because my office manager still has some front-facing patient duties on a limited basis, and we're trying to hire right now to get her fully at that elevated, like, integrator office manager type role.
So are you kind of moving staff up the chain, and the hire will be the greeter type, or are you plugging them in somewhere?
That's a great question. So it's going to depend on the person that we find, because if we find someone who has experience in discussing treatment plans and being like a financial coordinator, then that's where we'll plug them in. If we can't find anyone with that skill set ready to go, then yeah, we will start this person at more of an entry-level spot and then train one of our existing team members that has the communication skills and the social awareness to be able to, because that's a hard skill to teach, is you hate to say the dirty word sales training, but the person that's able to look someone in the eye and give them the financial rundown. I mean, that's not everyone can walk in off the street and do that. So that's a critical position. Like you said, it's arguably number one in the front office, just from then getting the practice to run like a well-oiled machine standpoint. You have to have that. So yeah, if we can find someone with that skill set, we'll plug them in, and if not, then we'll elevate from within.
Now, do we know, is there a shortage of front desk staff members out there? I want to make sure, are we aware of this?
not to the point of what it appears to be with hygiene.
Okay, but it's just hygiene.
It seems like it's just hygiene, yeah.
Okay. Whew, that's close.
That's what the rumor mill says, yeah.
I was worried you'd have an empty spot for forever.
Yeah, gasp.
I'm glad we're done. All right. Well, this is fun, Alex. Thanks for coming and joining on. We'll do these kind of periodically. We'll mix them in, in between interviews. But we will have a string of Practice Underwater normal anonymous interviews led by Suzanne coming up, which will be really fun. George and I will be on the intro outro, so you're not going to be not hearing from us every week. We'll be on every time, giving our analysis. So we're really excited. So thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And if you guys want to submit questions for our next Q&A segment, you can submit them to me at alex@sharedpractices.com, and we'll answer your questions at our next Q&A session.
I love it. It's usually me giving out my email. Now we have another one.
Delegate and elevate. That's it.
All right. See you guys next week.